The train ride to New York was everything the children had envisioned it would be. The young twins took full advantage of the long, scenic journey. They both took turns using their camera to film their travels and record the changing terrains on the ride to New York from Louisiana. There were gorgeous landscapes, mounds, grazing animals on plains and in valleys, beautiful homes, brooks, streams, sacred-looking groves of trees, and a host of other natural glories that caught their eyes and their camera's aperture lens, and even their parents were moved to take pictures and videos on their phones throughout the whole ride as well. The train would stop briefly in different states on the roughly day-and-a-half long trip for rest breaks. When it did, the whole family would exit their train cab and stretch their legs and backs and let the sun kiss their melanated faces. They did this in each state they stopped in. It turned into a game for the family after the first stop. By the time they reached the state of New York, the game had become a fun family ritual that included taking pictures of each family member standing in a comedic pose or in a b-boy/hip-hop stance in honor of their dad's love for old-school hip-hop music and artists. Next to each of the train stop signs, they would take these pictures. The signs told passengers what town or city they were in when the train stopped, and the twins realized that they would make for great reminders when they looked at the pictures later. The train ride ritual grew in detail and depth as they traveled further. When approaching the first stop in each state, the parents and children would all discuss facts about the state that related to their indigenous ancestors who had lived in those states before Europeans invaded what their ancestors referred to as Turtle Island, or what many people call America now. Then, when they got to the first stop in each state they had been discussing, each member of the family would take time to pay their respects to their ancestors, known and unknown, who had lived and or died in that state. Teary would choose and then pick pretty flowers and fallen feathers from each train stop, while Ramses picked stones that caught his eye, and the stones, flowers, bird feathers, and other natural things they picked from one stop would be placed reverently on the ground with small notes saying things like, "I love you, ancestors," or "Look out for our family," which they would place next to the flowers they offered up to their ancestors at the next train stop. The experience made the children even more aware of the connection between their deceased ancestors, the lands in which they lived, and their very own lives now. Their awareness of the connection between this world and the spirit world greatly increased. Their ancestors were pleased by this and paid even more attention to the twins. After a rest at each stop, the train whistle would blow as the conductor announced it was time to leave, and the family would get back on the train along with other passengers who had gotten off of the train to stretch their legs when it had stopped. The children and parents both enjoyed homemade meals for the entirety of the trip. Several nearby passengers commented on the organic and nutritious meals, which looked, smelled, and tasted great. The family shared a few meals with another set of families who expressed interest in their healthy vegetarian eating style. Finally, the train reached Grand Central Station in New York. The family got off of the train, said goodbye to their traveling mates, secured their luggage, and made their way out of the huge building. Ramses watched his Baba and Mama exchange business cards with a very well-dressed black couple who had been one of the families they had shared a meal with. His parents hugged each other and then instructed the twins to stay close to them. A moment later, they were moving together through Grand Central train station in New York City. The twin children studied the architecture in the building as they walked. There were statues, paintings, and large chandeliers almost everywhere, it seemed. Lots of people were walking briskly in different directions. "Wow, Mama, everyone is so busy," Teary exclaimed in observation of those around her. Both of her parents smiled and laughed knowingly. "Yes, guys, New York is a busy place," Tut replied. They finally made it out of the Grand Central Complex, and onto 8th Avenue. It was a warm evening and the sun was almost done setting in the west. New York City greeted the Louisiana-based family with a Friday evening crowd, towering buildings, and thick traffic that was starting to turn on its night lights. The family gathered underneath a tunnel outside one of the many entrances to the train station. The sounds, smells, and sights of the city that never sleeps greeted them continuously. Tut and T felt comfortable. Their children felt their parents' vibe of familiarity and sense of belonging, and it made them feel comfortable with the city also. Ramses felt an energy under his feet that was subtly increasing with each moment. He wondered as to what it was, and then his attention turned to his mother's voice. Right now, we are in Manhattan, or Manhattan, as your indigenous native ancestors of this land pronounced it. Manhattan. Remember that children's book we read a few years back called A Crystal City? T asked her daughter. Yes, Mama, I remember that story, Tiri answered. Well, Manhattan is like a crystal city because its base, or its bedrock, or the stone that it sits on, is one large crystal. The indigenous folks who lived here before Europeans knew the geology of the island. Tut had pulled up a map of Manhattan on his wife's iPad. He handed it to his son as his wife spoke to his daughter. Ramses looked down at the map on its screen and saw that Manhattan indeed was an island. Look, Tiri, we are here, he said to his sister as he handed her the electronic device. They considered these lands sacred because of their location and geology. Their shaman, leaders, and their people in general would come here to pray and do other sacred things at certain times during their calendar year. Tut said to his children as New Yorkers walked and drove by in both directions on the avenue. Ramses felt the energy beneath his feet increase slightly for a brief moment before returning to what seemed like its normal pulse. He liked this energy. It made him smile as the thought of the fact that he was standing on one of his favorite types of stones, a quartz crystal, crossed his mind. Come, children, let us teach you a lesson about catching a cab in New York City, T said to her twins. Tiri and Ramses picked up their single pieces of luggage by carrying each of the handles attached to them, and Ramses returned the iPad to his mother. Tut walked to the edge of the curb and stuck his hand out for a cab. He was dressed in a richly embroidered black and gold dashiki, with a matching cap and shoes. A few cabs passed by, and Ramses saw the drivers look at their father as they drove past him. The light turned red and the traffic stopped. Tut still held his hand up despite the red light. A quizzical look crossed Ramses' face, and he looked at his sister. Racism, white supremacy, they both said calmly. T had been watching them and overheard the comment. She laughed and rubbed the black diamond pendant her husband had purchased for her years back. It was a good luck amulet she had been using ever since she learned of its powers. The light turned green, and a few cars passed before a dark-skinned West African-looking cab driver in a brightly colored dashiki that matched his yellow cab pulled up to Tut. Baruka, the Hilton Hotel, 42nd and 8th Avenue, my brother, Tut said to the cab driver. The driver nodded and put the vehicle in park. The African man then helped Tut's family load up their luggage, and everyone got back in the cab. The twins observed that the cab driver was pleased because their Baba had initially greeted him in his native language. Baruka, my brother. Hello, everyone. My name is Suleiman, he said to the family. Hello, Suleiman, everyone responded to the African brother. As he drove them the few blocks from the train station to the hotel, the family made small talk with Suleiman about New York, his home country of Mali, West Africa, and the city of Manhattan. Ramses took in the sights he saw through the rear passenger window. New York really was a busy place, like his mother had said. As they passed the huge library on their left, Ramses' attention was caught by the shape of the Grace Building. He craned his neck to look all the way up its curved architecture that rose up to the sky gracefully. His youthful mind suddenly envisioned rows of ancient Kemetic netters lined up next to each other like the row of skyscrapers he was looking at. Rah! How cool was that? Ramses exclaimed as the vision richened in detail. Ramsey felt that energy beneath his feet increase its pulse again, but this time it was different. He instinctively closed his eyes, breathed in and out deeply, and then opened them again as the scene through the window before him shimmered and then changed completely. The skyscrapers were no longer there. In their place was a long line of granite statues of pharaohs that were the size of the skyscrapers. They glistened in the bright night lights. He recognized the first one immediately. It was the image of Narmer, Menes, or Aha, the first pharaoh of Kemet, or king of Egypt. As he passed each pharaoh, their cartouche would glow an intense golden sunlight color that would beam a ray of light at his forehead, which downloaded powerful ancient images and sounds into his mind. It all happened within a matter of moments. The hard jerk of the cab driver braking to avoid a pedestrian who seemed to jump out of nowhere to cross the street caught Ramses off balance, and he almost bumped into the back of the front seat of the cab. Quick reflexes from his dad saved him, though, but his attention had been broken. The vision faded out as quickly as it had appeared. "No!" he said disappointedly when it was gone. His mother looked over at him. "What is the matter, Ramses?" His father raised an eyebrow and turned his head back towards his son, whom he had just stopped from hurting himself, as Tiri studied her twin's face quickly. The small family observed their only son. He sighed and looked distraught. "Ramses just had another vision," Tiri responded for her brother, who still stared out the window intently, wishing for the pharaohs to return. There had been so many in the line that he had not gotten to pass by before the vision stopped. It took the distraught child a few seconds to settle back into the seat he had barely sat in since spotting the Grace building. His family had gotten used to him experiencing these sort of moments, so no one felt strange about it, and Suleiman, the cab driver, just smiled this wise African smile after Tiri responded for her brother. He seemed no stranger to the phenomenon either. Visions, apparently, were nothing new to an African. The Friday night traffic had thickened, as was usual for that time of night, so the rest of the journey took longer than it normally would. To be continued.